You're listening to Love Talk Live with the relationship expert, Jamie Bronstein, only on LA Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Love Talk Live. I'm your host, Jamie Bronstein, and today I have with me Marvin Mendez. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me, Jamie.
Thanks so much for doing the show. We've been talking about this for a while and we're finally doing it.
It is. It took me heading to California to be able to get on your show.
And the funny thing is that now you're here and we're not doing it in the studio, but the studio will happen at some point.
Absolutely. Hopefully I'll be invited again.
Absolutely. 100%. You are a friend. So I'm going to read to you guys a little bit about Marvin. He is a family and divorce lawyer, and he is just incredible. You're welcome. I speak the truth. So Marvin Mendez is a partner at Stern Perkoski Mendez and practices divorce and family law. Recognized as a results-oriented counselor, Marvin has the ability to consume and dissect complex financial documents that can strike at the core of some of the most tenuous parts of the separation. Marvin is passionate about creating safe spaces in which his clients can express discreet and personal ideas. A parent himself, Marvin's ultimate goal when children are involved is to maximize the welfare and civility for the family unit. He successfully executes the crafting, litigation, and enforcement of pre- and post-decree matters, while firmly advocating over custodial proceedings, treating child custody, child support, and visitation with compassion and care. Using his meticulous problem-solving techniques and in-depth knowledge of family law, Marvin advances expedient results and resolutions. He has successfully litigated high-profile cases and advocated for his clients' positions in the courtroom. As a compassionate trial attorney, Marvin strives for nothing less than professional excellence. Throughout his career, Marvin has been well respected among Chicagoland judges and attorneys, both as a collaborator to opposing counsel and as a negotiator. He was a partner at DWK and joined Stern Perkoski in 2020 to form Stern Perkoski Mendez.
Thank you. What a great introduction. I appreciate it. I got a little warm inside from that.
I love the bio. You know, before the show, Marvin was saying to me, he was asking if the bio was too long. And the funny thing is, a lot of my guests send me like pages and pages and pages.
Yeah.
I think this is perfect. I think it was beautiful. I mean, if I were going, there are people out there, you guys, hire this man, okay? Let him tell you more about his work before. But
Yeah.
Marvin, I'll just tell you guys, is very passionate about his job, and he has helped a lot of people. So
Yeah, I have. Thanks, Jamie. I appreciate that. I certainly love what I do. And I think one of the biggest things that you hit on in the introduction was, particularly in my field, family law and divorce law, is protecting the children's best interests. So I think that's one of the things that always strikes, at the core for me, particularly because a lot of these folks, they're the best people in the world, right? They're just going through some of the worst times in their lives. And so being able to help a lot of these folks navigate the system and understand the process and make sure that the kids don't get in the middle of this, because sometimes they do, is sort of one of the things that I strive for the most, making sure that everything goes smoothly, that the kids, while they're going through a significant change in their lives by their parents separating, shouldn't have to go through a lot of this stuff, right? Not to get political, right? But I was just watching, what was that, America's Got Talent show, and Claudia Conway came in on that, and you see how their parents often are both sides of the spectrum, and kids shouldn't be dragged in through that process. So my goal is always to make sure that kids are taken care of, that kids always know that their parents love them dearly, but that the parents also ensure that and recognize that just because you have a difference of opinion with the other partner doesn't mean that that person is a bad parent, and you're just trying to figure out your things. And I guess once it becomes a little less emotional, you can start being a little more pragmatic in the process and working towards ensuring minimum disruption towards the kids.
yeah, and the bottom line is, in the end, everybody is going to be happier. Like, it's better for kids to grow up with happy parents rather than all the anger and frustrations and tumultuous stuff going on in the household.
Of course. And one of the things that, comes about this divorce sometimes is the other parent finds a partner, right? And they get married again, or they start dating again. And, when you have a good relationship with the other partner, I think it's important to be able to communicate effectively, and make sure that everybody strives to make sure that that child is feeling comfortable, that they're not worried, oh my God, dad is with someone else, mom's going to be so upset over this process, I can't even bring that issue, or mom is dating someone else and dad's going to be so upset about this whole process, and I got to be dropped off, at the corner of the house or a block away, because otherwise it's always an ordeal, right? And that's what we find in these situations sometimes, where you have court orders that says the parents are going to exchange the children at a police station. One, how uncomfortable is that for the kids? But the reason they're doing it is because sometimes people are knuckleheads, right? And they create unnecessary ordeals thinking that they're protecting their child, but they're really just causing more of chaos amongst the child. But then, I think when you look at it from a different perspective, is it creates this vicious cycle, right? And it creates this issue of, well, if the kid thinks that that's how mom should treat dad, then maybe that child's going to treat their partner the same way later on. Or if the child believes it's, dad's behavior is appropriate towards mom, then he's going to be doing that with his partner. All right. And what you want to do is kind of cut that vicious cycle off and make sure that you can create and foster the love in that child for both parents and make them have a good relationship, and then ultimately build confidence for that kid, right? Because these things can destroy confidence in children.
Oh my God, yes. And it seems so easy and so simple. Like, I can sit here and say, just love and have compassion. And what is the point of even of making the other person feel bad? The marriage is over. However, people are human. And I see this with my clients, that people like to make their ex's life miserable. And that is because of their own unresolved issues. And so I always just recommend to people, I just ask them to think about, what is the meaning and purpose of this? It's hurting you, it's hurting them. Just, can you find a way to make some peace?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think it's always easier said than done, right? And that's the biggest thing. And I think even for myself, looking into this family and saying, look, you guys can get along and do better for yourselves. If you're really in the thick of it, you're blinded by everything, and you only like to feed that anger and that emotion. And in my situation, interestingly enough, that emotion seems to start to simmer once you start realizing how expensive this gets, right? Because, litigation, it's ridiculously expensive, and I tell my clients, you can either spend, $5,000-$10,000 getting in this case and working out amicably, which that's kind of low, but, you also have these cases that are running, $500,000, $1 million, because they rather bite off their nose, to spite their face, than work out something reasonable and amicable. And I've had situations where folks want to argue over the most minute, insignificant thing, albeit that's probably my own perception of it, right? Because it's not personal. Right. But I've had a lot of clients admit to, I don't really care about that. I just know it's going to piss her off or piss him off, and it doesn't feed well, because back to it spins off, to the kids, and the kids are, feeding on that toxicity. And it gets ugly. And you're right, it's easier from the outside in, but, my goal and my responsibility is not just to help my clients navigate the legal field and understand, what their best case situation or their worst case scenario is, Jamie, but it's also about helping them realize, look, this is not that bad. You're going to get through this, right? And I guess I'm often reminded, when I first meet clients, I'm often reminded of Dr. Seuss's book, right? The Places You'll Go. And I tell them, right, look, this is where you are. You're chugging along life and you're doing well. And then you get into this one page that I remember very vividly, the waiting place, all right, which is you'll be waiting for your Uncle Jake, or for the snow to pass, or the rain to stop, etc. But I always remind them of that next page, which says, but that's not for you. You move on to a place where boom bands are playing. And I think once they start accepting that throughout the divorce process, people start getting along well, or being more pragmatic. And it certainly aids when they start dating other people, because then they sort of shift their focus to something more about them and more personal to them.
Yes. I mean, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Going through difficult times is not easy. But if you can just have that knowing that there's going to be that light at the end of the tunnel, and that, like I was saying before, things will get better. And trying to make the other one feel bad is just, I don't know if you caught this before, but the truth is that when you try to hurt somebody else, you're hurting yourself. hurt people hurt people.
True. And I think you see this, right,
What it
in
is.
your area as well, right? And one of the things that I try to tell my clients all the time is an eye for an eye just leaves everyone blind. And I try to do that at home with my daughter. I'm like, yeah, let's not go back at that, or with anyone else. It's like there's no need to do that, right? You're bleeding money, you're bleeding time that you're never going to get back, and you're stuck in a process that, while the system does work and the system is effective, I think, people sometimes fail to recognize that their case is not the only one on the calendar, on the call. And so you may have cases that, unless you're willing to mediate or work things out amicably, you can be stuck in a system for 1.5 to 2 years, and you're not going to get that time back. But it is important to not feed into that anger, right? And I'm sure you see that all the time in your area of practice as well.
I do, yeah. And what I like to say to people that are dealing with anger, and for their spouse or ex-spouse to understand, is that behind anger is pain, and behind pain is sadness. So I help my clients to just own up to that, to look at their own sadness and pain, and to do that work to heal that, and not to take it out on who they're with.
Yeah. And I try to use a lot of that, in my practice also, to encourage people to say, look, I get it. This process is slow. It's horrible for you, but things are moving at the pace that they should be moving. And let's just redirect our focus and energy on something else. And, go get a punching bag or something, just
no joke.
in class, or something to release some anger and energy, right?
Yes. I mean, exercise is great for moving that energy around, but I mean, there's actually nothing wrong with hitting a pillow, doing a punching bag, as long as you're not injuring yourself, like hitting a wall.
Yeah.
It is a way to just get out that anger, and it's actually a kind of healthy way. So I encourage that.
I think adding to that, I always try to tell my clients, and I encourage them to go talk to a therapist, go talk to someone, right? You're not alone. And even if you feel you need to pay someone, you're not alone in this process. And I think one of the things that builds a relationship with my clients is that I'm very transparent and honest about my personal life, such that they feel comfortable with me, and they can say, okay, I'm not the only one in a position. No, I don't mean from a divorce standpoint. I mean from a pragmatic standpoint of go to therapy, talk to someone. And I often tell the story of, usually when I go to my therapist, it's just like, oh, I have so much other stuff to do. I don't want to do this stuff. It's taking forever. I have nothing to say. I just saw him last week. But then when I'm there for the hour, I was like, oh, I don't want to leave yet. There's so much more I need to tell you. I didn't realize.
It's so helpful. And you probably feel lighter after every session, right?
Oh my God. The conversations I have with my wife afterwards are amazing. She loves it when I go.
Oh, good. And by the way, everybody, I know both people in this couple, and they're both amazing. So if you do decide, anybody out there, to hire Marvin, just know that he is a genuine guy. He has a great relationship.
For me.
And my son just walked in. Hey.
Hi.
Okay.
Oh my God, this is fun. Let's help.
Don't worry about the door, okay? It's okay. It's okay.
And
I love it. Of husbands, and my husband is out of town, so my son is right here. Okay.
You're managing the whole household. You're the house CEO today, huh?
Oh, and also I can't wait to see me on Let's Talk Live.
Okay.
Yeah? It's better than I thought.
Watch my show on YouTube, like on the TV sometimes. That was funny. Okay.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. No, yeah, having a partner that, helps understand this process and work with me has made it, tremendously easy for my practice, because, she's always open to hearing things, or the different experience, or different creative arguments or solutions, or even sometimes you got to have a little levity in this area of practice. So I love sharing the jokes that I, sometimes convey by email, although most of them I think are dad jokes, but, she laughs at it and it's great.
And that's actually, I'm glad that you brought that up. This particular show is not about all these happy marriages, because we're talking about the dissolution of marriage. But one thing that if you are lacking in your marriage, if you're lacking laughter and this lightheartedness, that is something to look at, because it is so important. So I love that you guys have that. Yeah,
it is important. I think one of the things that I promote a lot in my practice and in here and with my team at the office and partners, it's family comes first, right? I think that's the most important thing. And no matter what's happening in your life, everything else can be put aside to make sure that you focus on family, which is paramount and second to nothing. Because at the end of the day, the practice is gone, business is gone, your family is going to be there, what sustains you. And for me, it's myself and my girls, and that's what's most important.
That is so sweet. He's a great dad, a great husband, and a great lawyer, obviously.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm curious, and I'm sure the viewers would love to know also. I'm curious how you got into this work. Was this something that when you were little, you're like, I want to be a divorce lawyer when I'm older? Or was, I'm just curious how you got to this. And then we can get into, I would love to talk about prenups and postnups.
Oh, fun.
Marvin and I were just talking about the other day, which I think is fascinating. I've never heard of the postnup. So can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Sure. A little bit about my story. I got into this practice just by chance, to be honest with you. I've been in the practice, in the legal fields for about going on 21 years now. And I didn't start this path, the normal path, which a lot of fortunate people do, which is go to college, go to law school, and then straight into work and become a successful attorney. I actually, started off, taking some time off of high school, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And so then a couple of years later, I decided to go and get in paralegal studies. While I attended school then, I had a fantastic mentor, which unfortunately passed away now, James Higginbotham. And for some reason, while we were in his class, he took a liking to me, and we got along really well. And he sort of, put me under his shoulder and on his shoulder and said, I want the best for you. And I want to wish you the best. So he started offering me certain positions that would allow me to become employed once I finished my paralegal degree. And so I started in about 2000 or 2001 doing some paralegal stuff at a civil litigation firm, which is a fantastic firm at the time, and that's what I knew. But as one of the elements of my graduation that required was a internship. And so I then ended up going and doing an internship at this place called Nadler, Pritikin, and Marabelli, where the three named partners then became my mentor for many, many, many years and many moons. Enrico Marabelli, James Pritikin, and more importantly, not the less, is Floyd Nadler and his son James Nadler. And so I worked with them, and as I was finishing my internship, they offered me a position at their office, which is a very successful and prominent law firm, family law firm in Chicago. And then I started working with there, and one of the partners said, you should go to law school. Law school hadn't even crossed my mind, to be honest with you. And so I said, fine, I'll try it. So I decided to go finish my undergrad at Northeastern and finish that. And then I applied at John Marshall Law School. And throughout this entire time, up until 2011, when I graduated from John Marshall, I was a paralegal and a law clerk. I was working full-time as a paralegal and a law clerk. And then I was going to school at night full-time as well. And so I was pretty much out of the house from 6, 7 in the morning till midnight every day, just because of this entire process. And once I passed a bar exam, I was offered a position at one of the other larger firms in Chicago, which is a very prominent law firm in Chicago. And I worked there for a couple of years until I had the opportunity with another partner at Steve Wittenberg. And then they started the firm Duches, Wittenberg, Koenigsberger, which I spent about 6 years at that firm. And that's also another top-notch firm in Chicago. And I was raised there under the tutelage of Steve Wittenberg, Dean Duches, and Michael Koenigsberger, which are some, like I said, pretty top-notch attorneys out there. And then, after a few years, doing this practice, I met some really great friends that I, would come across in court. And for the years, we've been talking about what the next steps are going to be and what we wanted to do. And so at one point, I decided, okay, maybe I think it's time for me to cast my own shadow, right? And I felt confident enough after having some really great mentorship over the years, who even to this day, I can still reach out in the event that I need anything or have some questions asked in the legal field. And they've always been there for me, and I decided to take my own steps. And I started my own practice September 2020, where I became a named partner on the firm, which the timing itself was kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But
wonder why.
Yeah, never mind the economic circumstances in the world and the pandemic, but
for people getting divorced, hello.
Yes,
For people.
Right. There was a rise, in divorce during the pandemic, but, I don't think that it was as much of a rise as, the news that were coming out of China, which they said when they lifted the restrictions the first day, people were, in a tremendous queue that they actually had to close down the court and put a moratorium on divorce filings to make sure that people weren't just making knee-jerk reactions. At least that's the media that was coming out of there.
Yes.
But there was a lot of stuff that was coming out in Illinois and throughout the U.S. as well, and keeping everyone busy throughout the process. But it's been a very normal process, shall I say, since the pandemic sort of got stable, shall we say, for lack of better words, right? People sort of got used to it and sort of readapted. But it was an interesting process throughout that entire time, right? Starting a new business, the pandemic happening, divorce numbers skyrocketing, everybody staying busy and on top of things. And the tricky part is like, well, how do we deal with all this stuff when the courts are still also adjusting, and how do we move cases in that matter? So it was nice. It was interesting.
Okay. Do you personally feel like divorce has gotten higher during this time from what you've seen?
I don't think as higher as everyone was, speculating that it would be. And maybe there's a couple of reasons for it, right? And these are, again, my own opinions, which is it because people got into some sort of comfort status quo and decided to stay together? Or some people say, let's work this out. Or some people maybe lost their job and didn't want to move and change or leave the house, or didn't have the financial wherewithal to be able to provide for two separate households and have chosen to either live together or pause the process. But I don't think the numbers I'd say they've exponentially have grown, but they've maintained steady. And perhaps it's also because people have just recognized, let's just get through this. Let's see what happens.
Right.
Let's see how it works out. Right.
Which that's what I've been recommending to people. I'm like, when this is really over, wait 6 months, at least, just give it that time just to see what's the pandemic, and so many people, I always give this example of they're spending more time together and they're frustrated that the other one is like lazy or not as clean because they're spending, the house is messy, whatever. That's not really a real reason to get divorced. I mean, if there's an issue underneath it, but give it 6 months, go back to work, have your normal lives again, and see if things get better. With that,
I agree 100% with that, right? I think just like when the pandemic started, everyone just shut down, closed their doors, closed their blinds, closed their windows, and didn't want to do anything. And I do agree that a lot of stuff, maybe started then to brew in the familiar relationship. But I think that since then, in some sort of sense of normalcy, people are being more realistic about the process, accepting more of the other. And I guess that's sort of, when people initially thought that this is the process they wanted to go through and thought that this is definitely the right direction, divorce and separation, is then they after started thinking about alternative paths, right? Which sort of leads me into one of the topics that you raised earlier, which were postnuptial agreements, which is people who did file knee-jerk reaction petitions and said, I just want to get divorced and I'm done with this. And they've separated for some time frame, decided perhaps maybe now it's not the right time to do it. But there was still that human aspect of it, right? That emotion that didn't allow them to calm themselves and feel that something was still off. So rather than just say, let's go down the divorce path, let's see what we can resolve here. A lot more lawyers, including myself, started getting sort of creative with preserving the marriage, right? And how do you do that? By creating some agreement after the marriage, but one designed to avoid divorce. And that's sort of when postnuptial agreements came into play.
So as a moral person, somebody that comes to you that wants to do a post-nuptial versus getting divorced, like divorce, you wouldn't say, no, get divorced so that you can get money. You would say, no, great idea. I support that.
Oh, absolutely. When clients tell me we're working on reconciliation or how do we do this, or I don't want to advance, but I'm still concerned. And then I mentioned the postnuptial option and they get really excited, that in conjunction with the potential reconciliation, I tell them it's music to my ears. I love the fact that they're still trying to work it out. And, like one of the things I said earlier is I don't advocate for divorce. I know I'm a divorce attorney and probably that goes against my business philosophy. But, first and foremost, my mentor told me many years ago, which is we're family law attorneys. We got to try to preserve the marriage. And if we can't preserve the marriage, then we have to preserve the marital estate because it's theirs and they work hard for it. And I live and die by that. I truly believe in that aspect. And at the end of the day, I'm just here to help you navigate. And so that's sort of the avenue that I pursue when I tell people, yes, it cuts into the hourly, rates. It cuts into the money that you're going to make in this process. But I don't think that this is our sole reason in this practice. And so I'm happy when they suggest agreeing to my postnuptial agreement and wanting to work it out, and, talking about the postnuptial agreement, the way that it's designed is designed to help you settle your differences, right? Enter into an agreement that if in the event one day in the future we decide to go through some divorce litigation like we've done this, rather than make it so heated and so contested like we've been over the last few months, because I guess they start to realize how ugly they get, right? And how bad their emotions are, or how it affects their family and their finances. They decide instead to come up with a resolution. Look, if we get divorced in the future, this is what it's going to look like. If we decide to divide marital assets, this is what's going to be included in the division of the marital estate. If we're going to argue about whether it's alimony or non-marital components, let's just resolve it now that we're on good speaking terms, just because we know how bad it can get between the parties. And people are happy about that. The contract provision isn't as smooth as, I guess, a lot of people would like, but there's smiles at the end of the day, right? Because they're going home to each other.
I'm wondering if you have a couple where one person is way more interested in the divorce than the other. Is that interesting for the person that doesn't really want to be getting divorced anyway to enter into these agreements? It must get quite.
It is. And I've dealt with that situation, Jamie. One position that comes to mind is where the husband's like, I'm not getting divorced. I want to work on this marriage. And the other person is like, I'm out. I'm done. This is not going to happen anymore. I don't even know why I'm staying around. Obviously, time then becomes your friend and you start to realize a different avenue you want to take, but there's still the desire to want to get divorced. People see it as then one last opportunity, right? One last Hail Mary to figure out how we're going to resolve it. And then they take the chance to address it there. There are people, though, however, just like, I don't want to do it. I'm just done. If we can even come to an agreement on something that should be done on their amicable terms, we're not going to come to an agreement on anything else. And it just shows the type of person you are.
Or like if we are possibly getting, it just seems like I would be curious to do a study on how many people do postnuptial agreements and then end up never getting divorced. Because in my mind, just instinctively, I feel like if you get to the point where you're doing something like this, then most often you'll end up getting divorced, or you would stay in a marriage and just not be happy. I don't know. This is my instinct.
Yeah. So in my practice and in my experience, perhaps because they've never come back to me because, they decided to get reconcile and to just work out their relationship.
Huh.
I haven't seen, people come back and say, it didn't work out.
Wow.
And
do you think that they both end up being happy, or is one person maybe still not happy, but they're just not divorced?
I think they got out whatever they needed to get out. Right.
Because they communicated.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense. It's like going to therapy. When you go to therapy, you have all these problems, but then eventually you just start communicating and you understand.
Very good. I think that's an important reason for it, right? I think they've gotten out what they had to get out. They've communicated effectively. There's instances where one partner wasn't aware of the breadth of the marital estate, and now by virtue of the transparency that's required under a postnuptial agreement, they've gotten the answers that they needed. They know that they're financially secure or not, depending on how the money was handled. They know that in the worst case scenario, they'll leave with 50%, right? If that's what you negotiated. They know in the worst case scenario what will be included as part of the marital estate versus what's not going to be included as part of the marital estate. And so all those factors weigh heavily on what decision you're going to make in the future, right? I guess this is sort of gives you your crystal ball, right? So now you're like, okay, I've got a glimpse into the future and I understand what it's going to look like. So I have nothing else to argue about. So now let's work on our relationship. So I'm glad to say that a lot of the postnuptial agreements that I've been part of in my years of practice have never resulted in somebody coming back and saying, I want to get married. I want to get divorced. What I have seen, though, is some postnuptial agreements being worked out and drafted during the divorce resolutions with the attempt to reconcile. But those have fallen apart, right?
Right.
And mostly because, when you're negotiating some of these things, I'll give you an example. In this very highly contentious and very expensive divorce litigation process and high net worth individuals, one wanted to exclude a specific item from the marital estate if the parties were to get divorced in the future. And, one of the parties was so adamant, like, I don't care, I will forego my interest in that. I just need to get back into this marriage, because one person was looking for financial stability and comfort rather than focusing on the crux of the relationship or the roots of the relationship. And she, in this situation, she was willing to sign and execute whatever was being presented before her. I never agreed to it. And my position was, look, I can't tell you if this is a good deal, particularly when we have no value on what that particular item is that they're looking to exclude from the marital estate should there be a divorce later on. Long story short, that asset ended up being worth millions upon millions of dollars, right? And had she forgone that interest, that would have been a significant piece of the pie that she would have gotten from the divorce. And she was so focused on the immediate gratification of what she wanted out of that she had lost sight of the big picture of what potentially she would have been entitled to. And so in those situations, it wasn't me discouraging the post-up, it was me discouraging from entering into a bad deal, right? And that's my obligation, to make sure that, look, is this a reasonable resolution for you? And if you're not going to get much of that, what are you going to get in exchange for it? And how do we make sure that, at your age, and either with your education or being a stay-at-home parent for an extended period of time, knowing that you're not going to be able to get back out there and make as much money as the other person, how can we find you the sweetest deal? How can we find you the sweetest level of comfort for you to be able to move forward and say, regardless of what happens in the future, I'll be okay.
Okay, so we are winding down, but I love that you just gave that example of the post-nuptial. Is there any type of example that you can think of why anybody should not get a prenup?
Well, no, I prenups I'm a big fan of. And surprisingly enough, during this pandemic, I think that's probably one of the things that I've been seeing the most, along with postnuptial agreements. And I think it's because a lot of these, younger generations, are understanding, their possibilities, right? They're understanding, that there is a future for them. They're understanding how successful they can be in the future, and they have foresight into it, right? Whereas, such as, for example, you may not have much now, right? You may get out of school. I'll give you an even better example. When I finished, graduated undergrad, I think my associate, I think my first job was making like $25,000 a year, right? And to me, I was like, oh, that's a great chunk of change. Never in my wildest dream did I expect to be where I am now, earning what I'm earning now, living where I'm living now, things of that nature. But a lot of these folks do see that. They do see that there is a future for them, right? And they do see that there are possibilities. So a lot of these young folks are planning well in advance, saying, look, in the event something happens, this is how I would want to negotiate this. Now, a lot of the stuff that they're looking to negotiate at this point is not immediately tangible, right? Because they're so young into their career. But they realize that in 10 years, they may be making $300,000, $600,000, $1 million, and that's all possible. And we all know that that's a realistic number nowadays. And so they plan ahead for that. Not because they're getting into the marriage planning to get divorced or planning to not.
Most people don't
be in love, right? But now you're just being pragmatic in your path, and you're negotiating with heart, right? To the same extent, recognizing, look, I love this person, we'll move forward. At the end of the day, whatever the results are, but let's plan this, and that's a fantastic and a tremendous tool for everybody. And I think there's a misconception that a lot of people think, well, I don't have anything that I'm going to lose, so I don't have to enter into anything. I think you should realize that once you get into litigation, again, attorney's fees can run you $20,000, $50,000, $100,000 or more if you don't have a tool like this and then you choose to litigate it later on.
Well, you are so articulate and eloquent in your delivery. I love how you explain things. You're a great storyteller.
Thank you.
You're a great lawyer. And I love that you just said heart, because you have so much heart. And anybody out there, when you're thinking of a divorce lawyer or a family lawyer, you want somebody who's genuine. And Marvin Mendez, so genuine.
Thank you. One thing, I know we're short on time. So one of the things that I do want you to consider is, when I connect with my clients are not generally just, we're in here for the next 6 months to 2 years, depending on how long the case goes. I've actually established long-term relationships with my clients to the point of, just last week, I was talking to somebody that I helped get, sole custody on a case when the kids were small. They just graduated high school and we're still in touch right? They're asking about my kid and how my kid is doing and how much she's grown, in the 7 years. I have former clients that I get invited to their weddings, when they get remarried.
Oh, I love it.
I'm aware of when, unfortunately their parents pass away, or the next milestone in their lives, or when they move to a different direction. Even as recently, one of my clients said, I'm doing my estate planning. Can I put your name down as one of the people to contact and be a primary decision maker in the best interest of my child, because you know the history of it, right? So those are the relationships that I have with my clients, right? It's not just about one aspect. Is we get so involved and we get to know each other so well in this period of time, and we know every single detail, at least I know every single detail of them, that we build bonds and relationships that last us years and years and will continue to last. Where, again, I just saw kids graduating from high school, or, the next milestone that they take. And it's very fascinating to see that. It's also realistically, getting older too.
I feel like you would, if you had any extra hours in the day, which obviously you don't, you would also be a good therapist. Like if you had another profession, because to be a good divorce lawyer, you need to be a good listener, and it sounds like and connect. So it sounds like you are very good at that. Yeah.
And I do love that. Thank you.
Okay. So how can people find you? I'm going to be posting all your links as well, but.
Thank you. So again, my firm is Stern Perkoski Mendez. We have a few offices in Illinois, and I guess I'm based primarily out of Illinois. Our offices are in Chicago and Evanston and Lake Forest. And my firm's website is www.sternperkoski.com. And if you need to email me, you can always reach me at mmendez@sternperkoski.com.
And I know you have a big presence on LinkedIn under Marvin Mendez, correct?
I do. Yes, that's correct. That's primary. I don't do a lot of social media. My wife does all the tagging for the most part. I'm mostly concentrating on LinkedIn and professional relationships and development and networking.
Okay, wonderful. And as always, anybody can reach me at therelationshipexpert.com. So Marvin, thank you so much for joining us today. It was so inspirational.
Jamie, thank you.
Oh, anytime, come back. And I just know that so many people are going to get so much out of this. And I'm not going to be surprised if you get a bunch of people reaching out to you.
That would be appreciated. Next time, I'd love to be in the studio.
Yes, that would be amazing. COVID, are you listening? Bless everybody's heart. Okay, well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. And everybody who's watching, have a great night. And join us every week on Love Talk Live on LA Talk Radio. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jamie.
You're listening to Love Talk Live with the relationship expert, Jamie Bronstein, only on LA Talk Radio.